I think for me, breaking that cycle and that pattern was first of all seeing it and recognizing it, but then saying, okay, what do I have to do to either reconfigure some of these archetypes and these constructs that I've absorbed and perhaps reprogram them? Or what does my ideal life look like if I absorb other archetypes, other characters? This is a narrative about a woman who was those things, and she was victimized and mind controlled and made submissive. And this entire show is a narrative about a woman rediscovering her power and also fighting addiction. And I was heavily an alcoholic when I was watching that show. Stories are powerful, so powerful. And we got to be careful what we absorb, even just passively, because it can get in there.
Welcome to the Repatterning Podcast, where we believe your mind-body system is your domain and that choosing the beliefs, habits, and patterns that best support you is your birthright. I'm your host, Arden Lee, creator of the Repatterning Project, an 8-week course in learning to free yourself from the patterns of your past and program your mind for your dreams of the future. Join me for these extraordinary conversations as we unpack the keys to creating our reality. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Repatterning Podcast. Today's guest, I am so excited to introduce you guys to because she is a dear friend of mine. Her name is Celeste Mott, and she is a professional witch. That's right. If you like this episode, you can actually reach out to her and hire her to cast spells on your behalf. She has been practicing her craft for over 20 years. She is also currently at work on a memoir about surviving an online vampire cult when she was a teenager. And she's recently had several reels and interviews go viral about that, which led to the deal for her memoir. So you can also check out her telling that story on a number of other podcast platforms. And she also, if you're interested in reading some more of her long form thoughts, she has a Substack that you can find under her name, Celeste Mott. And I am just so excited to have her on the show, partly because we both been so busy. I feel like we finally actually also get to catch up. So Celeste, welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you in my space.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here. It's a delight to see your face again after quite a while of not seeing it. You know, as you said, everything's been hectic and bananas. So, which is good. It's good, right? To be busy. But
it's good for both of us. I feel like we are both kind of going through separate glow ups with our online presence. And I wanted to congratulate you on that, first of all.
Thank you.
I know that you've been really hitting it with the online, real content, teaching your magic to other folks, really putting yourself out there with what you do. And that's so much of what I want to actually talk about today, because you have been a practicing magician, witch, for over 20 years now.
Yeah.
But in the past year, you were just telling me about how for the first time, in many ways, you are actually starting to use your magic to fully and comprehensively enchant your own life. And that is the big story that I want to hear on today's episode. I want to hear what changed, what have you done? Spill all your secrets.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I think I made that post about it, and you had said, "Oh my gosh, we should talk about this." And I had used magic you don't do magic for 20 years and never cast a spell for yourself. I think when I was on the Horrible podcast recently, I told the host Askia, the first spell I ever did for myself, I was 13 or 14, and I really wanted a ferret. And so I cast a spell so that my mom would let me have a ferret, which it worked, by the way. And then 6 months later, I had to give the ferret up for adoption because I was not ready to have a ferret. They're really hard work. They're difficult pets. They're so cute.
Sometimes
though.
You use magic to override your mom's judgment, and you're like, oh no, she was right.
And then you're like, oh, she was correct. Oh shit. I don't know if I can swear. But I'm going to, because I'm from Australia and I got a
You
potty
can
mouth.
totally swear.
Perfect. So yeah, it's not that I had never done it, but it's more, I think, especially when you are a professional magician or a professional sorcerer or a professional witch, right? You're an occultist, you're doing work all the time, especially for clients. It's very easy to forget about yourself, aside from any other reason, because it's energetically taxing. Doing work all the time for other people takes out of you. And there's always going to be occultists who are like, no, it doesn't. You're just doing it wrong. baby, if it's not taking it out of you, you're not doing it right, like, in my opinion, you know? It's not supposed to be, you LARP and put a robe on and wave your wand around, and it's just like eating Cheetos on the couch. It's energy, you're moving energy around. And so I was spending so much of my time doing that for others, which in its own way is incredibly rewarding. And obviously, I've built a business doing it. But I was forgetting that I'm allowed to do it for myself. And not only am I allowed to, but the more that you do that consistently, and especially if you kind of build the muscle and you allow the work to build on itself and you make it a pattern or a habit, the results are tremendous. So that was a big change in the last year or so, couple of years. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna start doing it for me, and amazing things have happened, so
Yeah, for those who have not been familiar with your work up until this point, share a little bit about what you enchanted for and what changed.
yeah, so I think the big one, and I have spoken about this before, it's kinda timely, I guess, depending on when you release this episode, because 'cause we're kinda coming up on Valentine's Day,
Yeah,
but,
it'll probably be somewhere around Valentine's Day, actually.
there we go, that'll be perfect. So, 2023, I had gotten out of a very, unfortunately, quite toxic relationship, mutually toxic. I'm not coming for that person, but it was just not a vibe. And we had clung to each other for a long, long time. It was an 8-year relationship that just finally imploded in a big and
Oof.
dramatic way. And coming out of that relationship, I really didn't know who I was, didn't know what I wanted, didn't know how to be single or be by myself. At the same time, I loved being by myself, but I was unpacking a lot of that. And obviously, though, when you've lived with someone for 8 years and you thought you were building a life with someone, loneliness creeps in very quickly because you're like, oh, well, shit, like this is my life, and what do I do? So I started asking myself questions about, what do I want in a relationship? What do I want in a partner? What do I want my life to look like as I reach my late 30s, and everything is changing because I'm getting a little older. And it had never occurred to me to do magic to summon like a lover or a partner. I just kind of I don't know, it just wasn't in my wheelhouse. I had done it for other people. I had helped other people do that kind of work, but for me personally, I was like, well, no, I'll just figure it out. I'll just keep scrolling Tinder and hope for the best. And finally, one of my mentors said to me, "No, like, just do a love drawing. What are you doing? Like, what do you have to lose? Just do it." And I thought to myself, well, I guess that's good conventional wisdom. What do I have to lose? I may as well. And I think the funniest thing about that working was that I really I really kind of phoned it in, to be honest with you. Like, I wasn't really giving that like 110% of my effort and energy, because I think
And
part of
yet
me, I know, I think part of me was like, I don't think it's really going to work. And but I did it anyway. I went through the steps. I gave it, maybe a C plus effort. And 6 months later, I met my now partner, and we've been together, for 2.5 years. And it's the best relationship that I've ever had in my life. Just truly uncannily meeting every specification that I had asked for in my petition. And that was the moment, I think, where I went, okay, well, if this can happen, against all odds, in my opinion,
with your C
maybe
plus effort.
with my C plus effort, like, what happens when I do the A plus effort, for other things? So that was really something clicked for me, I think, in 2023, and I realized, okay, well, if I'm not doing magic for myself, what even am I doing? Why would I not? What do I have to lose?
Yeah. Yeah. So what are some of the other things that you started enchanting for? I'm curious also, especially because I know that you've told me that you've been enchanting for more success in business, and that
Mhm.
also includes more visibility in your online presence. And you've also been
Absolutely.
mixing that with like the mundane work, right? Like Jason
Mhm.
Miller, who we both know, have both studied with. I'll probably have him on the podcast at some point.
You should,
He's
yeah.
yeah, he's always saying about, for anyone who doesn't know, Jason Miller wrote a ton of really great books. He wrote Real Sorcery, Financial
Mhm.
Sorcery, Consorting with Spirits, etc. He's a great teacher. Anyway,
A financial
uh,
sorcery right here. I read it all
there
the
it is.
time. It's amazing.
And I literally have Real Sorcery right behind me on my coffee
Yeah.
table because we're studying that this month in my advanced container. So I
Oh, I
literally
love
was
that.
spending this morning like making slides about it. So as he says all the time, what he believes is that the smartest, most strategic way to use magic is to hit both things in the mundane and in the magical. Create a
Yep.
plan that would work in the mundane and put that mundane effort into it, and also enchant that it works. So yeah, I'm so curious about some of the magic that you did and the mundane things that you did for your amazing glow up.
Yeah. It's crazy. So I think 2025, I was really slammed with work. I mean, I'm very fortunate to have a wonderful client base of regulars who have found me over the years, right back to when I was working in psychic shops in the French Quarter. I have people still who email me looking for readings or looking for work. And I'm very, very lucky that just organically, I've had the good fortune to meet so many wonderful, generous, beautiful, and delightful and interesting people. But 2025, I was doing what I would call like a lot of busy work. I was doing well. I was keeping my head above water. The business was doing fine, but I felt like I never had a moment to breathe. And it was really felt just like treading water a lot. And so I realized that something had to change. And I started doing a lot more sort of purposeful and targeted road openers for my business, a lot more financial road openers, things that were not really geared to, I want this much money in this given month, but more, okay, I want to attract the kind of client that I really am passionate about working with. I want
Nice.
to find pathways that my business can grow through that are sustainable for me as a chronically ill person so that I'm not just, you've got to be careful with spell work because if you don't, if you're not specific, the spirits and the energy is going to move through the quickest available channel. And I don't necessarily want 500 people blowing up my email inbox who will want to give me like $25 to light a candle for them. I want
Right.
to to open those roads to build the business in a way that feels sustainable and aligned with my values and all of those kinds of things. So I started doing
That's
more
so
targeted
smart.
work like that. Yeah, I think it's important, truly. And I think a lot of people do overlook that, especially if you're newer to your practice. You got to be specific. I did a finance spell in 2021. Like I said, there were little patches here and there of me doing work for myself, but it usually came from a place of desperation. So
Yeah.
2021, I was really struggling. It was, just post COVID, the unemployment money had stopped coming in. I had pivoted my business to being fully online, but I was struggling to kind of find sustainability in that. And I was not doing great. There were months where I made $500. It was really not
Mm.
good. And so I remember doing this St. Expedite, financial road opener and very foolishly just kind of saying, I need like $25,000. Like I need the money to come in. And a week later, we had to evacuate for Hurricane Ida and my house got fucked. The roof got damaged. I had water coming in my house through the ceiling in multiple places. And there was thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, like hundreds of thousands of dollars of damage to the house. And insurance wrote me a check for about $25,000. So
Damn.
I got what I asked for. Unfortunately, the repairs to the house far exceeded the amount of money that I got in my bank account, but I was not specific about how I wanted that to work. So, my poor spirit's like, "Yeah, girl, we did it. Why are you complaining?"
You asked for the ferret and then
And the ferret you received, why are you bitching about it? So that was a really big life lesson, and I've heard multiple other stories from people in the community who've had similar, monkey's paw situations. So
Yeah.
that was really eye opening, and I think from there I started to be a little bit more canny about these workings I was doing for myself. But the big one really, and I think the thing that we're probably going to start talking about, as you said, like the glow up, but December of this past year, I ran a group ritual for people who wanted to participate. It was a sort of small buy-in and I would do the work for you. And it was a New Year's Eve. threshold rite that was designed to release old patterns or release old attachments, things that we just didn't want to bring with us into the new year, and call in abundance, prosperity, health, wealth, love, whatever it is that you're trying to attract in the new year. Very, simple, basic premise. And it was a full day
Famous
working. It
last
took,
words.
right, right. It took, I don't know even, I mean, it was a multiple day thing really because it was kind of done in phases, but it took me like night of New Year's Eve. That's all I did. I just kind of devoted it to doing the magic. I'm sober, so I don't go out and like party anyway. It was not a huge sacrifice on my part, but I was like, yeah, let me start my year as I mean to go on, and I'll do it in ritual, which is what I would like my life to look like, more purposefully in the new year.
I was
So,
also fasting on New Year's Eve, just
mhm,
so yeah. So
mhm.
you
It's a
don't feel like you're the prude or anything.
Thank you. I'm not the weirdo, like, muttering in her backyard with candles lit on New Year's Eve. But yeah, so I did that. The rite was really beautiful. It definitely felt very potent, and I did, carried the petitions forward for all of the participants, which was it was very beautiful to see what they were letting go of and what they wanted to invite in. But then I also did a petition for myself. I was like, you know what? Again, I'm not going to neglect myself as I have historically done. Let me put myself in the pool here. And one of the
Nice.
things very specifically that I asked for was growth on social media, which is a funny thing because in some ways I think we're all aware that social media is a vanity metric. You're not a better person or a more interesting person. You don't have better things to offer just because you have 500,000 followers vs 1,000 followers. It doesn't work like that. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, in a number of the industries that I either work in or I'm trying to work in, the vanity metric is still important. And the big one for me is publishing. A lot of the time, especially as a nonfiction writer, they will look at your platform and they'll say, okay, well, you're not really there. You don't have the platform that we need to want to take your work on. So I thought, okay, I'm already going to put some mundane effort into this. Let me also just put some juice behind it, magically speaking. And I think I said something like, I want to be at 100,000 Instagram followers by the end of 2026, At the
Nice.
time I think I was sitting on about 32K. And as we're going to talk about, and as you correctly bring up with Jason Miller's approach to sorcery, which I love, by the way, mundane effort factors into this too. But I put that intention out into the universe. I did the ritual work. And then I started to show up for myself mundanely. And in the past 28 days on my Instagram account, I've grown it from 32,000 followers to I think I'm about to hit 87K,
Amazing.
which
Love
is
that.
insane. Um, 3.3 million views over the past 30 days. My Facebook page went
Nice.
from 800 likes to 22,000 likes. My YouTube account grew, and I don't even do anything with YouTube really. Like, everything has grown so
Wow.
exponentially that I'm a little, like, alarmed. I'm like, how did this happen?" Because I mean, the growth was bananas. It far exceeded what I was expecting. And yes, I definitely did put in mundane effort as well. But it was one of those things where I realized in that moment, okay, so this is it really. It is the intersection between that mundane effort and the magical side of things that I think has done this. People who don't use social media a lot for businessy things may not really know, but growing on social media now is really not as easy as it used to be.
Mm,
You used to be able to throw a TikTok up on TikTok and immediately you would go viral and get thousands and thousands of followers. It's just not the case anymore. It's very hard. And Instagram growth, particularly, can be really slow for people. So the fact
mm.
that I almost tripled did pretty much triple my following account in 30 days is bananas.
That's
And
huge.
I didn't do anything super special. I'm not a high production value person. I don't have a film crew following me around. It's just me and my phone yapping into the void. But I really think that the magic created that channel, and then hard work, effort, and mundane, technique solidified the desire and solidified the goal. So yeah, it's been great.
Yeah. You also, though, I noticed that you have a really tight formula for like putting a hook in the beginning of one of this is see this is the stuff that I have not bothered with yet.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I don't know that I will necessarily. Although I am also enchanting lately for online growth. And one of my reels with Doug Rushkoff, from episode 2 went, I don't know, it somehow got onto like the Explorer page or the Reels tab or
Uh-huh.
something like that. And all of a sudden, like that has, that had in a week, it had over 100,000 views on it. And I tripled my own following, which wasn't
Mhm.
saying much because I had not really been using my repatterning project account as much as I could
Right.
have. So I was only at about 500, but I'm at about 1,500 now. So, and I've
Tripling
just
is
only
tripling,
started
though.
the
Like,
yeah, and
that's
I've just
still
only started the
huge.
podcast, so it's,
Yeah. No,
I
it's
anticipate
huge.
it growing.
No, but
But
that's
yeah,
it. Exactly,
those
and I think, like, the hook and the technique, and this is where I'm sort of saying for sure the mundane side of things does matter, and I love Jason for
mhm,
that, for his approach to that, because I think a lot of occultists don't wanna look at that for some reason, especially, I think, sometimes when people are newer to the path, and this is not to dunk on people who are newer to practice, but I think there is an attitude of
of
like,
course.
"Well, I just cast a spell. Why didn't it happen?" It's like, "Well, you still have to do stuff." Like, you can't just sit there,
Yeah.
like, on your couch watching Love Island and be like, "Why is my life not amazing?" You gotta
That
do
would be
some
a great
things.
thing to talk about too, like why, why a spell might not work, or also,
Mhm.
why there's plenty of folks that I think that we know of in much of the occult scene who, are clearly casting magic and whatnot, but they may not be zooming out and looking at the comprehensive picture of their overall life. They may
Yeah.
not be enchanting for the right things. And I know this is something that I talk about a lot, which is that if we don't address our patterning, if we don't address our belief systems and our sort of automated responses to things, we can end up casting out of reactivity, which even if your
Yeah.
spell works, then you're just constantly in reaction to everything around you. And you may be, instead of actually enchanting for a better life, you may actually just be using magic to amplify
Mhm.
strategies that were misguided in the first place.
Mhm.
We know stories of people, casting compulsory love magic on, like, let's see how great of a celebrity I can get or whatever. And it's even if it does, first of all, that's a terrible thing to do to another person. And also, but even if it does work, what did you get out of that?
Mhm.
You got an ego boost, this is not like yeah.
No,
This is not like you called
absolutely.
in an aligned soulmate or you got a winning lottery ticket even, which of course, the magic for that is like everyone's doing magic for it. So there's almost no point in doing it because everyone's trying. But whatever it is, it's like, what did you okay, so you slept with a famous person. Now what?
Right.
Right?
Right. Right, and I think you're right that that comes down to patterning. I mean, I see it a lot in people I work with. Either it's the existing patterning kind of getting in the way because and in complete fairness, we don't know what we don't know, and
Very
we
true.
we we can't want what we've never had. It can be difficult to kind of think outside the box in that way, and I think that's where, work like the work you're doing is so important because you're helping people to see, okay, but this is your pattern. What if your pattern was different? What if we could change that pattern? What is it about the pattern that you're in right now that you're so attached to? Why are you stuck there? And I think those are really important questions because truly, we can't see ourselves. I mean, I can't clearly see myself now. I like to think that I'm a little better at it than I was, 10, 20 years ago. But we do sometimes need that extra help and to learn techniques that can help us kind of break out of that box. But I see that with clients a lot. I see them perpetuating cycles inadvertently, even when they are doing successful manifestations and things like that. But I also see them self sabotaging a lot when they get what they want. Because I think that we also are not trained or accustomed to getting what we want. And when you have it,
Right.
you then have to figure out what do we do with it. And again, that's where
How
the
to take care of the
patterning
ferret.
comes in. Mhm. How do you take care of your ferret? It's a great metaphor, actually. Pro tip, don't just stick it in the bathroom. Don't do that. You got to actually play with your ferret.
Right,
Play with
and
your
that's
ferret. everybody.
And that's a big takeaway. Play with the ferret. Yeah, so
Yeah.
much of the casting that I do on myself is actually to make sure that I am giving myself the patterning that will support my being in alignment with the things that I'm calling in. So
Yeah.
so much of what I've been casting for in, my own kind of embracing more my attempt in embracing more public figurehood by starting the podcast, and I've got music that hopefully is going to be released later this year, so I've got stuff that I'm putting out into the world, and enchanting for the leadership skills, to
Mhm.
be able to put myself out there, enchanting for
Yeah.
me being in my integrity, enchanting, for whatever things are going to allow me to avoid certain pitfalls, right? It's scary to put yourself out there because what if you get canceled, right? What if you say the
Mhm.
wrong thing? And, I'm a very big neurodivergent over talker or whatever. So there's parts of me that are like scared to fully express myself. Well, what if I cast for being fully in integrity with my embodiment of my message? Right? What if I what
Yeah.
if I do that before, which I did. I started enchanting around the podcast, gosh, probably halfway through last year. So taking like a good 6 months even just to prep myself mentally to sort of marinate in all that before I did it. So
Mhm.
all of
Mhm.
those kind of preparations can go into that.
Yeah, absolutely, you do. I mean, you're not it's not external, right, is the thing. It's not you are separate from your life. You are separate from your goals. There's connectivity between you and your goals. It's a give and a take, it's an exchange, it's a relationship. So if you're not also working on yourself, whether that be through casting on yourself, whether that be through therapy, whether that be through working with, esoteric practitioners to help you reprogram, repattern, you're missing half the ingredients, to really living an ideal life. It's about growth, really, ultimately, I think. And I've been thinking about that a lot, actually. We were going to talk about it, but, this past month, because I did kind of hit this, for me, a milestone. And there are a lot more sort of eyes on what I'm doing and what I'm saying, which, I've had a small following for a while, but also that stagnates after a while if it's the same 20,000, 30,000 people in your following. They know who you are. They're your audience. They've been there for 6 years. They're gonna support you even if sometimes you put your foot in your mouth. You suddenly are in front of 50,000 additional people who don't know you, and you have to develop a very thick skin very quickly because people are not nice. They're not nice
Yeah.
oftentimes. Yeah.
I feel like I've seen that happen in folks in the music industry too,
Mhm.
especially in the last few years. I feel like I've seen artists who will blow up on the scene, and then there will be certain things that their energetic systems quite clearly can't handle, that they weren't prepared for.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
they'll also kind of say things like, "Oh, like, don't take me this seriously," or just like, like they're trying to sort of brush off some of the things that they've
Yeah.
said. And I feel like they lose the connectivity with their audience that their art that they were putting out in the first place put there. And then I don't want to name names, but I just feel like
I
I have
have a person in
seen
my head who I feel like we could both be referring to.
I feel like
Maybe.
we do. Yeah, I feel like quite probably, yeah. And
I feel
just
bad for the
be
person that I'm thinking of because 'cause I'm like, man, because
I
it has to suck actually in some ways. Like, obviously, it's wonderful to have incredible success. Of course it is, and we
yeah.
should all have gratitude for the success that we have. But becoming a sort of almost overnight sensation or blowing up very quickly, especially if you're a neurodivergent person, like, being in that spotlight's hard, man. Like, even the
Yeah.
teeny, teeny, tiny fraction of that I've experienced, and it is teeny tiny, it's not easy. It's not easy to be under public scrutiny, especially if you're somebody who cares about nuance and being understood and being
Oof.
authentic. Yeah, forget about it. You're not gonna be understood. That's just it. That's it. You can
Yeah.
enchant
I
for
feel
it
like especially
probably to
people
be
like you and
better
me.
understood. Oh, man, it
Yeah.
drives me crazy.
Yeah, especially when, we're having these conversations, and even in having this conversation with you right now, there's a part of me that's like, "Do I need to explain to listeners that magic is real?" Like, and granted, of course, I've had Grant on the podcast, I've had Doug on the podcast who practices a bit. I've had Bridge Feltus, who is
Mhm.
a hermeticist, so
Oh,
Of
cool.
course, I've been weaving all that through here. But when we get down to something that is so direct as, hi guys, this is my friend Celeste, and literally she will cast a spell for you if you pay her money. And
Mhm.
while there is never any set guarantee in magic, she does do a divination to make sure that it is something that at least her spirits tell her that she can pull off. But
Mhm.
that's something that, people will look at. I had someone just the other day, I posted something where I said that I consider compulsory love magic to be as actually even more serious than physical attempted sexual assault. And I say this as a
Mm.
multiple count sexual assault survivor, which is not a thing that I thought I really had to explain on my page at this point,
Right.
given, how transparent I've been around a lot of my trauma history. And I had folks hopping on there thinking that what I was doing was downplaying the seriousness of sexual assault rather than saying, oh
Yeah.
no, compulsory love magic is not only just as bad because you're going to end up, with their goal is to get you to have sex with a person that you did not want to, but not only
Mhm.
that, but they're going to make you like it. That's what that magic is
Yeah.
doing. It is getting into your mind and creating feelings that would not have been there otherwise. So you won't even know. Unlike, at least when I got assaulted physically, I can either like defend myself if I can, which isn't always the case, but at least I know it's wrong. I knew that that was not something that I wanted to happen. Whereas,
Yeah.
if compulsory love magic succeeds, man, you would never know. And I have people coming on and being like, I hope a survivor doesn't see this post. I'm like, I am a freaking survivor. What do you think?
Right.
So
Those
man, yeah,
people need to go back and watch 2014's Jessica Jones with, David Tennant and, Kristen Ritter,
do
because
you
that
know that that show was one of my moments of awakening in weird ways
I
back in
didn't know
that?
that, but that's
Yeah,
interesting because it kinda was for me too in a strange way. I was very we're kinda going all over the place here, but I do wanna talk at some point about your thoughts
yeah,
about, archetypes and how you can kind of incorporate fictional characters and these impressions and sort of echoes and constructs into your concept of self. But I remember seeing that and being like, "Oh shit, this happened to me." And I didn't realize that it happened to me. And
yep.
Jessica Jones cracked that open for me. But I think that it's a great example. I mean, I'm sure people know about the show, but if you don't, it's essentially the entire narrative is a woman who has been mind controlled by someone who was her lover, but also her abuser. And it's a hard watch for a superhero show, for a Marvel show. It's a hard watch, to be honest.
I did not watch past the second episode, but you know what the funny thing was? It wasn't even so much for me that it triggered, "Oh, this happened to me." I think on some level I was aware of that. I couldn't watch it because, do you know that I don't know if you've ever read, there's like a Russell Brand essay where he talks about watching at like as like a a now like sober person who is a successful comedian, he's watching a video of himself doing drugs in some like old,
Mm,
shitty flat or something like that. And he's like, you would think that I would be watching this video and saying like, oh, it's so great that I have like overcome and look, I'm in such a better place in my life now. And he's like, no, I watched that video and I actually felt jealous of the old version of myself who still
mm,
got to do drugs. And that is how I felt
mm.
watching Jessica Jones, watching the mind
Interesting.
control victims claw at the walls, because
Mm,
I was addicted to submission, to surrender. I was
mm,
addicted to the approval from blind obedience, and I was so good at it too, man. Anything you told, I could do it. I could pull it off. I could,
mhm.
no matter what challenge. And that was in many ways how I felt some of my sense of self back then under that mind control pattern, etc. So yeah, man, like
Yeah.
watching Jessica Jones and being like, "I don't get to have that anymore." That's why I
Yeah.
couldn't watch it.
That's tough, dude. But I think this is the thing to kind of go back to the original point of the post you made and the way people responded. I think the thing is that anybody who's coming across your content, even if it's a Facebook friend who's maybe seen you post about other stuff before, something I've had to come to terms with is they're not in your brain. And
Yeah.
oftentimes they're poised to dislike you. Even if they like you, even if they're your friend and you've had many like good interactions prior, the way that the media landscape is now and the way that social media and tech companies have worked, people are primed to want to fight you. And so you use a keyword the wrong way. You don't cover all your bases. It's kind of like doing petitions with spirits. If you're not
Right.
being like extremely exhaustively clear, people are gonna either misunderstand or they're going to give you the least charitable reading possible. And it kind of just is what it is. Nuance is a sort of lost art, which is really sad because a lot of these big things that we should be having conversations about, compulsory love magic is one of them. There is nuance there. And the nuance is lost if we can't titrate it down a little bit and try and
Yep.
sort of listen to what somebody else is saying. I mean, also survivors are not a monolith. Just because a survivor might have read that post and been triggered by it, which could happen,
Sure.
doesn't mean that your take as a survivor is not valid. You're
Yeah.
allowed to have an opinion. You're allowed to have your thoughts. And
Yeah.
we
Yeah,
forget
and I
that,
kept
I think.
everything in, like, I statements, I'm like, this
Yeah.
is how I feel about it, and this is how but yeah. But I would love actually speaking of all that, I'd love for us maybe both of us can share some of the magic that we did to get ourselves out of that abusive programming, as you and I are both people who have been through toxic and abusive situations. We've grown up with a lot of childhood trauma in different
Mhm.
ways. You were in a vampire cult. I was a professional dominatrix who was also a 24/7 submissive to my boss slash boyfriend slash dominant, so we both have
Yeah.
a number we both had a lot of patterning that was pretty interesting, and both
Mhm.
used magic and witchcraft to break ourselves out of it and claim lives that we want. And for me, that's what repatterning is all about. So I'd love to hear some of the
Yeah.
things that you did specifically around repatterning, and especially if you're using magic and witchcraft, because I'm sure we have a lot of occult practitioners also listening. So I'm curious, just yeah, what did you do?
Yeah, I think that part of it was definitely less sort of a sit down strategy perhaps than say the business stuff. I think it emerged
Mm.
somewhat more organically. But the big one for me was recognizing as I sit here, it's funny, I'm looking at you, but I'm also looking over my desk. I have this little block mounted quote and it's a Stephen King quote. It's fiction is the truth inside the lie, which is the
Oh, love that.
epigraph at the beginning of it. I got it at Michael's on sale after Halloween. I was like, "What is this doing?" It's like a live, laugh, love block mount, but it's like a Stephen K it's bizarre. It was very
You
synchronicitous
already know
kinda
I love my
stumbling.
love for Michaels.
Yeah, we love a
That's where I got
Michael's. My
that's
little
where I
rat
got the chase
couch.
lounge for
Yeah,
your rat, exactly, yes.
my little rat guy. Arden was like, "I'm sending you a present. It's a couch for your rat." I was like, "Yes, amazing." Um, yeah, but so this idea for me, I think, was I started to recognize probably in some ways while I was still in the cult, but especially after I started, well, when I was banned and excommunicated, and then I started deprogramming from it, recognizing the power that story has over us. And I know you had
Mm,
Grant on as like pretty much your first guest. So Grant obviously talks about this a lot in their work, but it's so true. We don't realize the power that the story has over us. And it's not just the story that, you don't have to be a writer who's literally writing stories. It's the stories we consume. It's the narratives that we let other people put on us. It's what we absorb through media. It's what we pay attention to. Everything is a story. The music you listen to is a story. The art that you're looking at is a story. What you're doing in your day to day life is a story. Human beings are narrative entities. That's what we subsist on. And so for me, I think breaking that curse in a way was recognizing what the narrative was and what I had. I mean, I'm not going to even just say what was put on me. That's part of it, but also what I like willingly consumed, what I
mhm,
wanted to be. I mean, the cult that I was in, a big part of it was collective and collaborative writing. It was role play. I mean, it wasn't role play because they were telling me that they were really vampires, but it was also there was elements of writing stories together. And the role that I was taking on in that narrative, the big meta narrative, the in retrospect, the fucking hyper sigil that we were all feeding into for a decade plus, was that I was mentally ill and deeply unwell, that I was sort of bewitched and submissive to these sort of dominant vampire characters, that I was probably going to die, and that I was sort of weak and useless and just a puppet. Like that was the narrative that the sad part is, you talk about what listening to that Russell Brand thing and the idea of like looking back at your past self and feeling sort of a jealousy. That's what I wanted. It's
Yeah.
not like this narrative was being given to me and I was like, fuck that. At the time I was like, yep, sounds great. Sign me up. I'm, you know, a disposable pawn. Sounds awesome. Please put it in my veins. Literally put
It's
it in my veins.
wild the similarities between what you described and the thing that I was in at the BDSM house where I worked. There's
Yep.
that I am Whew. Oh
Because
my
it's
goodness.
power and control, right? Is the bottom line, and
Mhm.
this is what I've realized in retrospect about the cult group that I was in is that that's what it boils down to. People always say to me, "Well, what were they? Were they extorting you for money, or like what was the point?" And I was like, "No, the point was power. The
Yeah.
point was that these people could log into this internet forum, could put on a mask and a costume of narrative. And they knew that with the power of narrative and suggestion and potentially a little bit of magic, but that's the jury's out on that, they could
Mm.
alter the reality of like 300 people. And
Yeah.
that's intoxicating. You want to talk about the intoxicating and addictive power of magic. That's very intoxicating. So I
Yep.
think for me, breaking that cycle and that pattern was first of all seeing it and recognizing it, but then saying, okay, what do I have to do to either reconfigure some of these archetypes and these constructs that I've absorbed and perhaps reprogram them? Or
Mm.
what does my ideal life look like if I absorb other archetypes, other characters? And I mean, it's funny we sort of organically talked about Jessica Jones because that was part of it. I remember watching it and thinking, this is a narrative about a woman who was those things and she was victimized and mind controlled and made submissive. And this entire show is a narrative about a woman rediscovering her power and also fighting addiction. And I was heavily an alcoholic when I was watching that show.
Mm.
So, stories are powerful. So, so powerful. And we got to be careful what we absorb, even just passively, because it can get in there.
Yeah. I know for me that the thing that parallels your like, no, I wanted this. For me, I wanted to be submissive because there was in my mind an unspoken agreement. There was, I will do
Mm.
anything you say. And the bargain for that is you take care of me. You treat
Yeah.
me like I am a luxury item because I can do all these things. And that
Hmm.
was actually like the moment that the world, like reality kind of cracked open for me and I actually began understanding repatterning is I realized that that was a false belief. I realized
Mm.
like your value doesn't actually impact how people treat you. I was like, why am I'm like this golden goose laying golden eggs every month for this person and they are quite literally strangling me. Why would you do that?
Mhm.
I'm the one
Mhm.
paying your rent. Are you kidding me,
Mhm.
And realizing that that was a lie. And that like that for me, oh my gosh, like because imagine like you suddenly realize that thing that you've been kind of building your entire personality around is
Yep.
not true. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, shit, I have to learn how to take care of myself and like from scratch. And that's why I think my repatterning journey was relatively fast because once I saw that,
Yeah.
I couldn't unsee it. So I was like, well, what if I've been believing that, what else have I been doing trying to make something work, which is a misguided strategy, which is not actually doing the thing. And it was like opening the closet and like all the boxes tumble out.
Yeah.
So what
Yeah,
story would you
revealing
say
I
sorry,
was
go
just gonna say
ahead.
revealing the pattern or taking off the mask, unmasking the reality of the situation, I think is huge. And that it's same for me, like being able to see it and then really not being able to unsee it was definitely step 1. But I
Yeah.
interrupted you. I'm so sorry.
So I'd be curious to know what story would you say you are now living under?
Yeah, I think I'm actually in a way in a kind of transition period where I'm not sure what I'm sort of emerging into, but I can tell you what the last couple of years sort of was typified by. And after I got out of the cult, and then also after I left a series of abusive relationships, I started working very heavily again with Inanna. And I
Nice.
I had done some Inanna work prior, but not ever consistently. She is the center of my Venus altar. So actually when I did the work to summon my partner, that was, she was a part of that work too. And what I've always loved about Inanna's story and really all like catabasic myths is the idea of going into the underworld, but you don't stay there. You come back. The return is a huge part of that myth. And there's so many versions of that. Inanna is the one that I particularly gravitate to, but in my sort of personal cosmology, Alice in Wonderland is a catabasic myth.
Nice.
Persephone is a catabasic myth. We have all of these stories throughout human history of women, usually, descending into the underworld and then returning. Some of them don't return. Persephone gets her ass stuck down there, but some of them do come back. And so for me, I think working with Inanna, and I do every week, like that's probably the core of my practice is I take my work with Inanna very, very, very seriously. And it's been very healing to go on that sort of personal catabasic journey. I don't think it's ever something you only do once. There are so many underworlds that we're going to find ourselves in over the course of our lives, whether it's an abusive relationship or grief or addiction. And for me, it's been all of those things. But you
Yeah.
go on that journey and then you come back. And so that was one story that was very important for me to understand better and absorb more deeply into my sort of energy body, I guess. And then the other, and this is kind of goes back to vampire stuff, and it's weird. This I'm gonna sound like a crazy person. That's okay. There's always somebody in the
I
comments saying
love
that you're
this
a
about
crazy
you.
person. Like, someone's always going to be like, "That bitch is crazy." It's like, okay, that's fine. Like, I have a great life, so live whatever.
Yep.
Um,
Mood.
whatever, man. But so when I started, I guess I thought I was done with the deprogramming from cult stuff.
Mm.
But, again, what I've learned is there are many underworlds, and sometimes we think we're done with repatterning or deprogramming, and then we're back in it again in a different way.
Initiation is lifelong.
Absolutely. And I think it's beautiful, actually. I mean, I think that's the way to be. I don't think personally that the idea of like coming to a stopping point is really, it's not how I work. But
Yeah.
I guess it was 2022, I think, when the first season of AMC's Interview with the Vampire TV show came out, and I knew that was gonna fuck with me. I was like,
Oh
I
gosh, it
know.
would, right?
Yeah, I was like, I
Wow.
know this is probably gonna be a little triggering in some ways,
Yeah.
but I also knew, I mean, I still love Anne Rice's work and have an immense respect for her as an author and a writer and a person, and the books are still important to me, so I knew I was gonna watch it. And I'm watching the show and subsequently watched also season 2, and it's not, this is not a spoiler, but, I'm just gonna talk a little bit about the show briefly.
Go for it.
There's a character in the show, Daniel Malloy, who is a character that I had always kind of related to. It was a construct that I had felt kind of close to because Daniel is the interviewer in the first Interview with the Vampire book. He's the human being who hears the vampire story and then subsequently he gets turned into a vampire in later books. But he's a POV character in some ways, or he's like the audience in, I guess, in that first book. You feel like Daniel because you are a human being reading this story about fantastical vampire stuff. In any case, I'd always liked Daniel's character. I'd always felt a kinship to the things that he went through, especially the older I got. Daniel Malloy's character in the books is an alcoholic and a drug addict, and so that was
Mhm.
something that I also related to. So I'm watching the show, and in the show, they age the character up. The character is supposed to be, the book is set in 1978, I think, and the character is supposed to be in his early 20s. In the show, Daniel's like an old, tired man who is done with everyone's shit and has Parkinson's. He has a chronic illness. And so
Wow.
I'm watching the show and thinking, huh, it's so funny. Like, I do kind of feel like Daniel as I watch this show because I'm also old and tired and sick of vampire bullshit and have a chronic illness.
Oh,
So I was like, okay, sure, word. But I'm watching it. And in season 2, it's revealed and this is not in the books, which was the crazy part, but in season 2, it's revealed that Daniel's memories have been being erased and his mind has been being controlled by Armand, who was the vampire in the cult that fucked with me and told me that he was erasing my memories and fucking with my mind and mind controlling me.
Wait, did you
Yeah.
divine on this? On whether there's
No.
anything there, if that's
I
just a
probably
coincidence?
should.
That would be my very first, like, man, I'm in
Yeah.
divination space, like, literally every day. I'd be like, "No, okay, now I'm gonna literally divine later today. With your permission, I might
Oh,
ask."
please,
Because that's
please, because it was
that's
weird,
nuts.
dude. It was weird, and I think, I watched season 2 when it first came out, and it definitely resonated as weird and very emotional for me then, like, I remember being a little bit
Yeah.
fucked up about it, actually, and then I rewatched season 2 last year after I had come out and started telling my story, and I was going back into the narrative so I could write this memoir, which is ironic because also in the show, Daniel was writing a memoir, like, it's just, like, the beginning of season 3, which it's not out yet, it's gonna come out this summer, but all the teaser trailers are literally Daniel suddenly becoming, like, wildly famous for the vampire books he's writing about his real experiences with vampires, and I'm just like, "Okay." Fiction and reality, man, they're closer than you think, but I think coming to terms with that weirdness and that sort of
Mhm.
narrative resonance has been part of it too, but I don't know what's gonna come next. I feel like there is, perhaps a sort of 2026, 2027 archetype to claim, a character that I will resonate with or a resonance there out there in the ether that I will step more fully into. There's some shift is coming, and I'm not sure what form it will take, but I'm a big
Mm.
believer in that. I think what we see ourselves in and where we see echoes of ourselves, that's very potent as well. And, people may be listening to this and thinking, "Isn't this bitch a witch? This isn't witchcraft." Like, it is. It
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
It
Yep.
truly is.
You know what's funny for me too is I've had my own vampire problems in the past few years. I did not really grow up with a love of vampire lore in the way that you did. I had my
Mhm.
own things that I was into or whatever, but this kind of landed in my lap. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, we're not going to have time in today's episode to like talk about witch blood or whatever. But what's really funny for me is that reading Michelle Bellanger's The Psychic Vampire Codex has this beautiful way of putting the vampire archetype into the overall kind of cosmology, as in, like,
Mm,
you know what? Some things take more energy from some spaces, but some places have actually excess energy to give. And so it creates this cycle, it creates this balance between light and dark, between the Grant has been talking about this too, the idea of like Tifereth, the sphere in the Kabbalic tree, being like the exalted sun versus the black hole, which is the cosmic vampire. The black hole that's on the other side of the tree, and all
mm.
of this kind of coming up. ContraPoints also made a really
I
great
love
video
her.
essay. Did you watch the one on Twilight? It was, I mean,
I don't know
it's
if I
basically the
did,
whole
actually.
vampire myth.
Yeah, I
It's
don't know if I
it,
have. I love her work, though, so I'm on her Patreon. I really should, like, spend more time actually absorbing the content she makes because she's brilliant. Oh my goodness.
If you do watch the vampire one, I would love to know your thoughts, because she
Yeah.
also kind of talks about this, the balance of polarity and the chase and like the fluidity between,
Mhm.
between dynamics. So the funny thing that I've kind of, I had to give up BDSM entirely for like the past decade because I had an unhealthy relationship with it clearly, and I
Mm.
needed to, to reset the pattern. And at that time I didn't know if I would ever return to it. And it's actually in some ways been the vampire archetype that has shown me a healthy
Yeah.
way of saying, like, no, this can always be in motion. This can always
Hmm.
be this circular, this circular dynamic of energy, as long as there is balance between both people, and
Yeah.
for me it's really coming back to, it's actually kind of coming back around to that very original thing, which is like, actually, I am this valuable and I can be of service. And there are all these things that I can do for a partner that I love. But the important thing is that I am like treasured and respected for that, right? And like,
Yeah.
and actually like to actually have that, like, you know, if I please people, then I will be cherished. And well, I have to have discerning boundaries about that and about who
Yeah.
I'm choosing. But to make that a reality, which I think will sort of, you know, will sort of end up being where I come full circle with all of that. So it's kind of, yeah, it's fascinating that even though I didn't start out in the vampire world, it was the vampire archetype and especially Michelle Bellanger's work in the Psychic Vampire Codex that showed
Hmm.
me that that was possible.
Because it can be a healing thing, that's the thing. And I think that's been the weird part of my journey is that one would think that perhaps after everything that I went through, I would be like, no more vampires. Don't want to look at that or think about that ever again. But I still love vampire literature. I'm still very drawn to that archetype. And I think that there can be ways to work with that, embody that, that aren't, extremely damaging. The issue in the group that I was in is that it was all done in this incredibly predatory and manipulative way. You might argue, well, vampires are predatory and manipulative. They are. It's not great when they're secretly like 58-year-old women in Canada, that's the downside, who are not being honest about who they are and what their intentions are.
Right.
So,
But also like
yeah.
owls are predatory and they are a
Right.
part of the forest. They are
It's
a
the
part of nature. So
ecosystem. Exactly. Exactly
yeah,
right.
how are you as either a vampire or a vampire food perhaps? Like how are you fitting into the ecosystem? Is it
Yeah.
sustainable?
Yeah.
Which is a repatterning mood indeed.
Totally. And I think that's it, though. I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's like sustainability. And that comes back even to what we were saying about magical practice and whether our spell work is supporting us or not. Is it sustainable? And it's going to look different for everybody. That's the hard part, which takes us back to the conversation about nuance as well. But it's very difficult to be prescriptive about these things and say, oh, everybody should avoid BDSM forever because it's bad and it's toxic, or, everybody should avoid
Right.
vampire literature because it's satanic and predatory. It's different for everybody. Your path is going to look different. That's why I think, your work with repatterning is important, that you do it on an individual level, because a pattern that
Mm,
plays out for one person might be great and super beneficial and awesome. In another person's life, it might cause extreme destruction. The best sort of
yep.
mundane example I can think of is most people I know can have a pretty healthy relationship with alcohol. I can't. I had to break that pattern. I'm going to be 6 years sober in 2 days.
Oh,
And
congrats.
thank you. For me, it was like, I can't do this. I've tried. I've tried to, just tweak it and play with it and see if I can, have a moderate approach. And it didn't work for me. I had to totally put it away and say I had to hang up my drinking alcohol archetype hat, my Dionysian hat, and say, no, that's not for me. It's great for some people. Some people love it. It works for them. I will never be the kind of person who says no one should ever do a substance or imbibe alcohol, but for me, it was not going to work. And I know that you talk about this kind of thing in your work as well, but it's familial patterning too. In my case, like my
Mm,
family has a
yeah.
long history of running the alcoholism pattern, so someone had to break it, and I guess it was
Yep.
going to be me. So
That might be a common trait in vampires. I want to bring
yeah,
on Tommy, our producer, since we are nearing the end of the hour. And Tommy's going to go ahead and ask you a deep cut question.
okay. Oh, I'm excited.
Well, this one's going to be a bit more recent, but I was kind of glad that our recording plans got a little mixed up this last week because I was excited to hear about your recent Mall World
Mall
Lucid
World.
Dream meetup. And
Yeah.
I wanted to just check in. I know that was about a week ago now. So what did the results turn out like for your big meetup in this Lucid Mall World space between you and your fans?
Yeah. So, oh my gosh, Small World is so cool, you guys. If people listening are not aware, it kind of had a viral moment at the end of 2025, and the New York Times was writing articles about it, and like the Wall Street Journal was writing articles. It was really weird, not about my stuff, but about the concept of Mall World generally. And Mall World is, we think, a collective shared unconscious space that it appears that multiple people dream about. Multiple people are experiencing this sort of strange, dreamy mall area. And there's someone on TikTok, I can't remember their username, but they've drawn a whole map of Mall World because Mall World is connected to Airport World and Train Station World and Toilet World. Don't go to Toilet World. It's not fun there. It's not a good time. I don't know if you guys have dreamed about the toilets. We don't like that. Tommy's like, I don't know. I don't think I have. Good. Don't go to Toilet World. But in any case, so I came across all this stuff and I sort of mentioned it offhand in a video, and a bunch of people were commenting and saying, oh my God, say more on this. What's the deal? And I do a lot of work with lucid dreaming. Dream work is a very, very integral part of my witchcraft practice. And so I thought, wow, well, wouldn't it be fun to run an experiment where everybody in the same general sort of 12-hour period sets an intention, uses a sigil, does a meditation that I will record, and we'll see if we can kind of meet up in the Mall World space. And we did the first run of the experiment about a week ago, so sort of mid-January. And I had everybody prior fill out a Google form. The idea was that they were going to fill out this Google form anonymously and tell everybody what they were going to look like in Mall World. And that's how you kind of do a little bit of double blindness, because we weren't going to tell everybody, hey, I'm going to be the one wearing the clown costume. We were going to do it anonymously and then reveal it later. We haven't actually revealed the results of that Google form yet because the United States went butt-fuck crazy last week. I mean, if it had not already been going butt-fuck crazy. And so everybody was a little stressed. We did Mall World experiment round 1, but I think people were understandably a little overwhelmed and stressed and freaked out. So we're going to do another one actually tomorrow night. We're going to do round 2. But even just from round 1, it was interesting to see results. On the night of the Mall World experiment, because I did it also, I didn't dream about Mall World, but I dreamed that I was in the train station part of Mall World directing people to Mall World, which kind of makes sense because I was the one running the experiment, right? So I was standing on this
100%.
train station platform being like, hey, everybody, get on this train. This is where we go. And then the dream shifted for me. And I was in this very weird sort of medieval tavern. It kind of looked like the prancing pony in the first Lord of the Rings movie. And there were all these people sitting at this super long, like medieval trestle table. And that was kind of it. It was just a little flash. And then my dream shifted again. And I dreamed that I was in the group chat for the experiment and that everybody was saying, oh my God, I dreamed about being in this medieval tavern. And then I woke up for real. And I went and I checked the chat and we were decompressing about it. What did everybody dream? Did you go to the mall? Some people said, yeah, I was totally there. Other people said, no, it didn't work for me. But an alarming number of people, apropos of nothing, said, I dreamed I was in this really weird medieval tavern place at this really long table. And I was like, okay, all right. So something's going on, and and I've believed for a long time that mutual dreaming is possible. I think you can dream walk people, especially if you're a skilled astral projector. I definitely think that this is a thing that
I have
people
been dream walked.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yep.
And
actually not even in a violating way. I just I'm rolling my eyes. I want to just say that. But by someone asking for my help,
Yeah.
Someone
it happens,
who is in
right?
distress. Yeah.
And my fetch, basically, my sort of witch body dream walks people all the time without me even necessarily being aware of it. Like the number of people who are like, you were in my dream and you gave me an old book. And I'm like, oh, okay. Seems right. That seems correct. But I think I've never heard, I'm sure it's happened and I just don't know about it. Please tell us in the comments. But I had never heard of anyone doing a big, large scale experiment like this to see what would happen. So it's been really fascinating to get that feedback. And I think everybody in that there's about 600 people in the group chat, so it's robust, right? Everybody's at different phases. Some people are practicing occultists. Some people are brand new. They've never had a lucid dream. So results are going to vary. But I'm excited to see what happens when we repeat, and we do it tomorrow night, and then we'll probably do a round 3 just to see when we do finally reveal that Google form results sheet, who's seeing who in the dream space. A lot of people were, for that week that we were kind of playing with it, saying, oh my gosh, my lucidity has improved. I'm having many more lucid dreams. I've remembered my dreams more than I usually do. I've been to the mall. I saw you, Celeste, in the mall. I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. So
And
it's
you were
working.
there, and you were there.
And you. Yeah, exactly. But it's fun. This is the thing also. Magic should be fun. Magic should be enjoyable. If you're not getting a little bit silly with it sometimes, what are you doing? It's supposed to be magical. It's supposed to be enjoyable. Have fun with it.
Have you
So
have you
true.
read Hank Green's book, An Absolutely Remarkable Thing?
I haven't. No, I've never read any Hank Green. I guess I should. Now I'm intrigued.
Okay. It's about this same kind of concept of like a shared dream
Really?
space and people like problem solving and like using just collective skill and everyone's like weird little hyper interest and expertise to navigate something that's affecting like
Ooh.
everyone collectively. So as you're describing like conducting people from train world to mall world, I'm like, yeah, this sounds just like that.
Man, I'm going to have to check that out. That's fascinating. What did you say it was called?
An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by
An
Hank
absolutely
Green.
remarkable thing. I'm gonna write that down when I'm off this call. I'm gonna look that up. I love that kind of thing. I think the power of the subconscious mind is phenomenal, and we don't really understand how that works yet from a scientific standpoint. So I think we've got to seize the means of production now before it's controlled for us by evil overlords. That's my final statement on the matter.
True that. I mean, gosh, you're not wrong. It was first TikTok, then Mall World,
Right. Don't come
So,
for Mall World, Oracle. Come on now. Jeff
yeah,
Bezos,
no,
stay out of the mall.
we got to fortify Mall World. We got to set up our wards and our protections. Keep Mall World a sacred
That's
space.
right.
Well, Celeste, thank
Yeah.
you so much for joining us today. You are such a delight, and it's so good to catch up with you.
You're a
And what
delight.
a fun conversation this has been. And you guys, if you're listening out there, don't forget, if you want to hire Celeste to literally cast a spell for you, she will do
We'll do
that.
it.
Just make sure you really think about whether you want to ferret, or
Yeah.
magic. Magic is one of those things that I almost feel like, everyone spends so much time on the technique and not a lot of people spend time thinking about what to ask for. So Celeste,
Yeah.
thank you for having this amazing conversation with us today where we can unpack some of that.
Thank you so much. This was an absolute delight. Both of you are wonderful and tremendous. I knew you were wonderful and tremendous, Arden, but Tomi is also obviously wonderful and tremendous. So thank you so much.
And where can folks find you if they want to continue following your work?
Yeah, you can find me on all of the social media forever because that's all I do now. Please end me. I'm Celeste Mott on Instagram. I'm Celeste Moth on TikTok. And then Celeste Mott on Substack and Celeste Mott on YouTube. So TikTok's the only anomaly there.
Awesome. Thanks again for being with us. And thank you to everyone out there for listening. And we will see you soon. Thank you for listening to the Repatterning Podcast. If you're curious about the Repatterning Project, the 8-week course in mental mastery and creative freedom that inspires these conversations, you can check out more details at therepatterningproject.com. We run a cohort twice a year, or you can download the self-study version of the course and get started today. We also offer a 4-week course on narrative magic and archetype titled Myths and Magic, Changing Your Life Through Story, also twice a year. If you'd like to join our community, the Repatterning Parlor, on Discord, you can sign up for $5 a month at patreon.com/therepatterningpodcast. Thanks to everyone who makes the Repatterning Podcast possible. Firstly, our award-winning producer, Tomi Trembath of the Keymaster Collective network of podcasts. She also produces Transcending Comics, Vision in the Void, and Giant-Sized Violence. Thanks also to animation studio Mortis Madriax, who created the video for our introduction, as well as to Andrew Means, who composed and produced our theme music. And also thanks to Alvarez, who took the photos of yours truly that you see on the cover of each episode if you're watching the video version. And finally, thanks to you, our listeners, who give meaning to this work. Our greatest wish is that whatever you've heard today inspires you to live freely and begin creating your reality from the inside out. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again soon.